The Atlanta Falcons were dealt a major blow after both Tua Tagovailoa and Michael Penix Jr. suffered injuries during training camp. But instead of waiting for either quarterback to recover, the team has just made a shocking move that's caught fans completely off guard. It looks like they're signing a new quarterback. Here's what really happened. Training camp is supposed to be the easy part. No pads yet, no live hitting, just guys running routes and finding a rhythm before the real violence of the season starts. That's not what happened in Flowery Branch this week. The Falcons opened camp with their two projected starting quarterbacks, unable to take a single competitive rep between them. Michael Penix Jr. is still working his way back from a torn ACL, and he wasn't cleared for 11-on-11 work when the pads came out. And then, out of nowhere, Tua Tagovailoa turned up on the injury report too. Not a preseason tweak, not a camp bruise, something that flared up before the Falcons had even finished their first walkthrough. As HC Kevin Stefanski announced, Tua Tagovailoa will be held out due to an injury that flared up, and Michael Penix Jr. knee won't participate in team drills. Think about what that actually means. This is a team that traded for one quarterback and drafted another, specifically so they'd have a real competition at the position this summer. Instead, the Atlanta Falcons quarterback battle isn't going as scripted to open training camp. In fact, the top two signal callers won't be full participants as practices open. Stefanski tried to downplay it, telling reporters flatly, Tua is dealing with an injury right now. It's not long term, but the timing could not have been worse. Adam Schefter reported the specifics on Tagovailoa's issue. Back tightness, nothing structural, nothing that screamed long-term concern. Still, when your QB1 and your presumptive QB2 are both watching practice from the sideline on day one, you don't have a quarterback competition anymore. You have a question mark with no answer. And that's when the Falcons made their move. It wasn't a trade. It wasn't a blockbuster free agent signing. It was something almost nobody had circled on their camp preview. The team released veteran backup Trevor Siemian on the same morning with an injury settlement, and turned around and signed journeyman Cooper Rush within hours. For a stretch that morning, the Falcons' quarterback room consisted of exactly one healthy body, an undrafted rookie out of Minnesota State Moorhead named Jack Strand. The news broke that Trevor Siemian was being released with an injury settlement, in addition to a handful of other roster moves. Michael Penix still isn't medically cleared, and Tua Tagovailoa is dealing with some back tightness that has him sidelined for now. That left the Falcons with exactly one quarterback on the roster, rookie and former D2 darling Jack Strand. But the Falcons also signed Cooper Rush on Wednesday morning to round out the depth chart a bit. Sit with that for a second. A team that entered the summer with legitimate Super Bowl buzz around its quarterback battle was, for a few hours, down to a Division II undrafted free agent as its only game-ready arm. Nobody predicted that headline in June. Rush himself didn't have much warning either. He wasn't sitting at home waiting for the call. He was mid-workout back in Dallas when his agent rang. Rush told reporters that he was in the middle of a workout in Dallas on Tuesday, before getting the call from his agent to jump on a flight to Atlanta. He landed, signed his deal, and was on the practice field the next morning like nothing happened. That's the NFL in a nutshell. No roster is ever really settled, no matter how much a front office plans. The receiver room noticed the scramble too. Jahan Dotson said he'd seen Rush going through an informal tryout before the ink was even dry. A small detail that says a lot about how fast this all moved. There was no long negotiation, no extended evaluation period. The Falcons needed a body who could throw an NFL football under center, and they needed him by that afternoon. Stefanski, for his part, tried to frame the chaos as just part of doing business in this league. Asked about the double hit of Tagovailoa's flare-up and Siemian's release, he shrugged it off with the line, "This is the NFL. You cannot predict what's coming," which is coach speak for yes, this is bad, but we're not panicking. He wouldn't put a firm date on when Tagovailoa returns to practice, only that it was expected to be short-term. Here's what makes the decision to move on Siemian genuinely surprising instead of routine. Siemian wasn't a nobody. He was a veteran with real starting experience, a security blanket, exactly the kind of thing you want in your back pocket when your top two guys have complicated injury histories. Cutting him, even with an injury settlement attached, at the exact moment your room needed depth the most looked, on its face, like the opposite of caution. It was a bet that Rush, a much cheaper and much more recently available arm, was simply the better fit for what Stefanski's offense needed right now. The corresponding numbers make it clearer just how thin things got. Before Rush's signing, the Falcons had exactly 2 of their 4 rostered quarterbacks fully healthy, and one of those 2 was an undrafted rookie who'd never taken an NFL snap. Their top two quarterbacks, Tua Tagovailoa and Michael Penix, are both expected to miss time early in camp because of injuries. That leaves the Falcons with only two of their four quarterbacks currently healthy. Analysts around the league were quick to point out how precarious that situation was, with one roster note bluntly calling it a potential disaster room if Tagovailoa couldn't suit up soon. And the offense needed reps installed in a completely new system. So that's the moment this story really begins. Not a trade rumor, not a benching. A Wednesday morning in Flowery Branch when the Falcons looked at an empty quarterback room and had to decide in real time who they trusted to fill it. To understand why this decision felt so jarring, you have to go back and look at how fragile this quarterback situation already was, long before training camp ever started. If you want to understand why one injury update from Michael Penix Jr. can shake an entire franchise, you have to go back to where this all started. And it started with a draft pick that raised eyebrows across the league. Back in 2024, the Falcons had just handed Kirk Cousins a 4-year deal worth $100 million guaranteed in free agency. Weeks later, at the draft, Atlanta stunned everyone by taking a quarterback anyway. Atlanta selected Washington quarterback Michael Penix Jr. with the pick, a stunning move considering the Falcons signed Kirk Cousins to a 4-year contract, with $100 million guaranteed during free agency. Cousins was coming off a torn Achilles. Nobody expected the Falcons to draft his eventual replacement. In the same offseason, they paid him franchise quarterback money. Penix's college tape explained why teams were split on him. He'd thrown for 9,544 yards and 67 touchdowns at Washington, led the Huskies to a national championship appearance, and was widely praised as one of the best deep ball throwers in his class. But the medical file was the concern. 4 season-ending injuries suffered at Indiana, 2 torn ACLs, and 2 shoulder ailments left some uncertainty about how teams would value him. Some evaluators didn't even think he'd hear his name called in the first round. Atlanta bet on the talent. For a while, it looked like the gamble might pay off. Penix took over as the starter and gave the Falcons a spark, leading the offense to points and flashes of the arm talent that made him a first-rounder in the first place. Then came Week 11 against Carolina. Penix went down with a knee injury in the third quarter of an overtime loss. Within days, the news got worse. A partial ACL tear, compounded by a bone bruise. He was already managing from a Week 7 game against San Francisco, after suffering a third-quarter knee injury versus the Carolina Panthers. Atlanta Falcons quarterback Michael Penix went under the microscope to discover the latest ailment in a tale of debilitating career injuries. Earlier in the week, it was reported that the second-year signal caller had suffered a partial ACL tear in his left knee. The injury also featured a re-aggravation to a bone bruise he suffered in a Week 7 matchup versus the San Francisco 49ers. The team confirmed the worst days later. Surgery. Season over. The Atlanta Falcons confirmed the worst for their second-year quarterback, Michael Penix Jr., on Wednesday. He will undergo surgery and miss the season. The Atlanta Falcons will lose quarterback Michael Penix Jr. to an ACL injury in his left knee that he sustained in Sunday's Week 11 overtime loss to the Carolina Panthers. Then coach Raheem Morris said surgery would happen sooner rather than later, and backup Kirk Cousins stepped back in to finish out the year. NFL insider Ian Rappaport reported the recovery window would run at least 9 months, putting a realistic return somewhere around the middle of August. That's an agonizingly tight window for any player trying to be ready for a season opener, let alone one working through his third ACL reconstruction. Morris asked directly if Penix could be ready for Week 1 of the following year. Wouldn't rule it out, but also wouldn't promise it, saying only that he had a lot of confidence in his young quarterback. What made this injury different from Penix's first 2 ACL tears wasn't just the number. It was what it meant for how the recovery had to be handled. Penix himself was completely upfront about it once camp arrived. He explained that in his prior 2 ACL recoveries, he'd been cleared for contact by roughly this point in the process. This time, the timeline stretched further, and he made clear he understood exactly why. While addressing the media, the 26-year-old revealed because this is his third ACL tear in the last 7 years, he does not want to rush himself back. He said that in his last 2 instances, he was cleared by this point, and followed that up by saying that full clearance may still be a ways away. That's a remarkably candid thing for a starting caliber quarterback to say out loud in front of reporters, with a QB competition supposedly hanging in the balance. Most players in his position downplay injury news to protect their standing on the depth chart. Penix did the opposite. He told the room, essentially, that his own body was going to dictate this competition regardless of what the coaching staff wanted. He doubled down on it once camp actually started, speaking to reporters after a session he couldn't fully participate in. Penix said his doctor had told him to expect roughly another 4 weeks before he'd be cleared for full contact, and he was blunt about what that meant for the quarterback battle everyone had been building toward. Penix said that his doctor told him that it will be another 4 weeks before he's cleared for full contact, and if this is the case, the Falcons no longer have a quarterback battle. Do the math on that. 4 more weeks from the start of camp puts his return to full team drills somewhere near the tail end of the preseason, if everything goes perfectly. It would be virtually impossible for him to suit up week 1 if he isn't even cleared for 11-on-11s for another month. Essentially, that means he would be limited for the vast majority of training camp. Given the injury history, nobody in the building was going to push him into live reps just to save face on a competition storyline. Penix wasn't hiding from the reality either. Asked how the whole process had felt emotionally, he didn't sugarcoat it. It was difficult, he acknowledged, but as he works through the 3rd ACL tear of his career, he opts to prioritize his health. He gave a specific quote about it too, describing the mental grind of watching a timeline slip. "I was told another 4 weeks, possibly going into that next stage," he said, before adding that it could come sooner depending on how his body responded through camp. So by the time training camp opened, Penix's situation wasn't a mystery anymore. It was a known, managed risk. The team wasn't blindsided by his absence from 11-on-11 work. Stefanski confirmed it directly to reporters, saying plainly that the team didn't have an exact timeline and that Penix was simply attacking his rehab as hard as he could. That part of the quarterback room's chaos, at least, had been telegraphed for months. What nobody saw coming was the other half of the equation, the guy who was supposed to be the steady, healthy option. That's where Tua Tagovailoa's story becomes the second half of this puzzle, and why his sudden absence from the practice field turned a manageable situation into an emergency. Tua Tagovailoa wasn't part of the Falcons' plans 2 years ago. He arrived this offseason specifically to be the stabilizing presence Atlanta's quarterback room desperately needed, a proven starter who could compete for the job while Penix worked his way back from surgery. The Atlanta Falcons' Tua Tagovailoa, acquired this offseason to compete with Michael Penix Jr. for the starting role, had a flare-up of an undisclosed injury. New head coach Kevin Stefanski told reporters the logic behind bringing him in made sense on paper. Penix's return date was uncertain, and no franchise wants to walk into a season with its only healthy option being a player recovering from a 3rd ACL tear. Tagovailoa gave the Falcons a fallback that didn't require them to bottom out at the position, and crucially, his arrival gave him a real head start in learning Stefanski's new system, while Penix was still rehabbing on the side. Tagovailoa has received a head start in learning a new offense, being installed by a coaching staff that had nothing to do with the franchise's decision to draft Penix a couple of years ago. That last detail matters more than it sounds. Stefanski and this entire coaching staff are brand new to Atlanta. They didn't draft Penix. They have no organizational loyalty to the pick that raised so many eyebrows back in 2024. Whoever wins this competition wins it on performance, not on draft day sentiment. And that reality alone gave Tagovailoa's side of the battle real weight the moment he signed. He wasn't walking into this competition with a clean bill of health either. Tagovailoa carries his own well-documented history of head injuries from his years in Miami, a fact that hovered over every conversation about durability at the position. Even before back tightness showed up in Atlanta, injuries are a concern at the quarterback position for Atlanta. Between Michael Penix Jr.'s ongoing recovery from the knee injury and reconstructive surgery he underwent last season, and Tua Tagovailoa's concussion history. So when reporters heard he was being held out of the very first padless practice of camp, the instinct wasn't to panic. It was to brace, because durability questions had already followed him to Atlanta before he threw a single pass in a Falcons uniform. The specifics of what sidelined him were relatively mundane, at least on their face. ESPN's Adam Schefter reported it as tightness in his back, nothing structural, nothing that pointed to a long layoff. Stefanski did not specify the injury, but Adam Schefter of ESPN reports that the quarterback is dealing with back tightness. Stefanski said the injury is not considered serious and that they expect him back sooner rather than later. Other reporting in the building echoed the same expectation, with sources telling Schefter that Tagovailoa was expected back on the field within the week. Still, not serious doesn't erase the optics. This was supposed to be the healthy half of the quarterback competition. Instead, on day one of camp, both projected starters were standing on the sideline in shorts and a cap. The Atlanta Falcons will have to wait a little longer to see Tua Tagovailoa in action at training camp. On Wednesday, new Falcons head coach Kevin Stefanski revealed that Tagovailoa is dealing with an injury, via Josh Kendall of The Athletic. However, Tagovailoa's injury does not seem serious, with Stefanski indicating the former Alabama Crimson Tide star will be out there sooner than later, and that he'll be back shortly. Stefanski leaned into that same message multiple times across the day, trying to frame it as routine rather than alarming. He told the team's own website that Tagovailoa would be back sooner rather than later, essentially asking fans and reporters not to read too much into a single practice absence early in camp. It's the kind of message every head coach gives about every minor injury. The difference here is that it landed on the exact same morning as Penix's own setback, which is what turned a minor story into a 5-alarm one. And that double hit is precisely what created the emergency the Falcons had to solve. With Michael Penix Jr. still not cleared medically after suffering an ACL injury in 2025, the Falcons will not have the quarterback battle between him and Tagovailoa just yet. A competition that was supposed to define the entire summer in Atlanta didn't get to start on schedule. Instead, it got postponed by circumstances neither player fully controlled. There's an added layer of pressure buried in Tagovailoa's contract situation that makes his health status even more significant for how this plays out. Whoever wins this job doesn't just get bragging rights for camp. They get the keys to a rebuilding offense with actual pieces around them, including a talented backfield and receiving core that Stefanski inherited. And notably, Penix is under contract with a 5th-year option decision looming in a couple of seasons, meaning the Falcons have a very real financial incentive to see him succeed if his body allows it. Penix Jr. is under contract for the 2027 season, with a 2028 5th-year option that has to be exercised before his 4th season. Having a starting quarterback on a rookie deal allows you to build a better team around him. But that incentive only matters if he's actually healthy enough to seize the opportunity. And for now, the health readings from both quarterbacks were pointing in exactly the same direction. Not ready, that's the environment Stefanski and his new front office walked into on the first day of real practice. 2 projected starters, both unavailable, for reasons neither one could control and neither one had really predicted heading into the summer. The pressure to have a functioning quarterback room wasn't theoretical anymore. It was happening in real time. On the first day, cameras were rolling, and that's exactly what forced the front office's hand into the roster shuffle that made this a national story in the first place. Once it was clear both Penix and Tagovailoa were out of team drills, the Falcons had a genuine roster problem on their hands. And it went beyond just the top of the depth chart. Trevor Siemian was supposed to be part of the answer. A veteran presence, someone who'd started NFL games before, exactly the kind of insurance policy a team wants when its top 2 options both carry injury question marks. Instead, on the same morning Tagovailoa's back tightness surfaced, the Falcons released him with a non-football injury designation. On Wednesday morning, the Falcons released veteran quarterback Trevor Siemian amid a flurry of moves. That decision on its own looked bizarre from the outside. Why cut your only healthy veteran depth option at the exact moment you needed depth the most? But dig into the timeline and the logic becomes a little clearer. Siemian's own health had become a limiting factor, and the team decided a fresh, healthy arm was more valuable than a familiar face working through his own issue. Siemian's release limits the available competition at the position, and the Falcons are left with Penix, Tagovailoa, and rookie Jack Strand on the depth chart. For a window that morning that left exactly one healthy quarterback on the entire roster, Jack Strand, an undrafted rookie out of a Division II program in Minnesota who'd never taken an NFL snap in a real game. Atlanta released veteran quarterback Trevor Siemian with a non-football injury designation, leaving undrafted rookie free agent Jack Strand as the only Falcons quarterback fully cleared for practice. That's not a hypothetical emergency. That's an actual NFL team with actual regular season games on the schedule in a matter of weeks, down to a rookie who was a first-team Division II All-American just months earlier and nothing more on his resume. The Falcons didn't sit with that for long. Within hours, word broke that they'd agreed to terms with Cooper Rush, a well-traveled veteran who'd bounced from Dallas to Baltimore over the last couple of seasons. Adam Schefter confirmed the Falcons are signing Cooper Rush. Rush wasn't a big name to casual fans, but around the league he had a reputation as a steady, professional backup. someone who'd started games in relief in Dallas and did the same more recently in Baltimore. His numbers from his most recent stint tell the story of exactly what kind of player the Falcons were adding. A game manager, not a difference maker, but someone who wouldn't actively lose a game for you. The 32-year-old Rush has 8 NFL seasons under his belt and has appeared in 42 games, 16 starts. In 4 games for the Ravens last season, 2 starts, Rush completed 65.4% of his passes for 303 yards and 4 interceptions. That's not a stat line that wins a starting job outright. It's a stat line that buys a team confidence its practice reps won't be wasted while it waits for its real quarterbacks to heal. Rush's own comments after signing made clear he understood exactly what role he was walking into. He wasn't there to steal anyone's job. He was there to be a professional camp arm, take reps, and let the coaching staff evaluate Strand and the rest of the room without throwing every single snap to an undrafted rookie. Analysts around the league framed the move the same way, describing him as camp insurance rather than a legitimate threat to the starting competition. Rush, who told reporters that he was in the middle of a workout in Dallas on Tuesday, before getting the call from his agent to jump on a flight to Atlanta, should be viewed as merely a camp arm for the Falcons, who were down to undrafted rookie Jack Strand as its lone healthy quarterback. Even with Rush in the building, the room still leaned heavily on unproven or unavailable arms. That instantly put a spotlight on Strand that no undrafted rookie usually gets in his first professional training camp. He went from an afterthought on the depth chart to, briefly, the only quarterback the team could actually trust to run live reps, and then to sharing that workload with a well-traveled veteran who'd been signed less than 24 hours earlier. The Falcons only kept 2 quarterbacks last year, but in our recent 53-man roster projection, we included Strand as a 3rd quarterback ahead of Siemian. Strand will get an extended look during the preseason, while Tagovailoa's work may be limited, and Penix has yet to be cleared as a full participant at training camp. There's a broader roster logic at play here too, one that explains why the Falcons didn't just shrug and roll with 3 arms. Carrying 4 quarterbacks through the grind of camp isn't just about having a break glass option. It protects every other player in the building from getting worn down by an overloaded rep count. Carrying 4 quarterbacks helps the 90 players at camp get reps, and helps to keep everyone fresh in what can be a hot and humid August in Flowery Branch. When 2 starters are compromised at once, that logistical need becomes urgent rather than optional. Analysts and fans reacted to the whole sequence with a mix of alarm and dark humor. Message boards lit up comparing it to a full-blown disaster room, with some pointing out that if Tagovailoa couldn't get back on the field soon, he'd be walking into week 1 without meaningful reps in a totally new system. A dangerous proposition for any quarterback, let alone one with his own injury history. One widely shared comment even joked the team should just go get a 3rd lefty quarterback to complete the room, a nod to how thin and strange the whole situation had become in the span of one morning. Through it all, Stefanski kept returning to the same even-keeled message. He wouldn't put a hard date on Penix's return to full drills, telling reporters directly that the team simply didn't know exactly when that would happen. "We don't know exactly when that will happen," Stefanski said. He praised Penix's work ethic through the process, adding that his young quarterback was attacking the rehab hard and that he appreciated the approach, even without a firm timeline attached to it. That's the tightrope Stefanski has to walk through the rest of camp and into the preseason. Project calm to the locker room and the fan base, while privately managing a quarterback room that looked, for one uncomfortable morning, like it might not have an NFL-caliber arm available at all. The scramble got the roster back to 4 healthy bodies by the end of the day, but it didn't erase the underlying uncertainty that created the emergency in the first place. And that uncertainty is exactly what's going to define the rest of this summer in Atlanta. Step back from the chaos of that single morning, and the bigger picture in Atlanta comes into focus. This isn't just a quarterback competition anymore. It's a test of an entire new regime, built specifically to end one of the longest playoff droughts in the league. The Falcons haven't made the postseason in 8 seasons, a stretch that includes back-to-back 8-9 finishes under Raheem Morris. Atlanta missed the playoffs in 2025-26 for an 8th consecutive season and fired now former head coach Raheem Morris afterward. The Falcons finished 8-9 and went under their regular season win total for a 3rd straight season. Ownership decided that even a season that ended on a 4-game win streak wasn't enough evidence. The previous leadership group could get this roster over the hump. The Falcons' season-ending 4-game win streak wasn't enough to convince principal owner Arthur Blank that his current leadership regime was the long-term solution. That's what brought in the entirely new hierarchy now steering this quarterback decision. Kevin Stefanski, a two-time Coach of the Year, was hired away from Cleveland to run the program on the field. He becomes the 20th head coach in Falcons history and will report to the team's president of football, Matt Ryan. Stefanski comes to Atlanta after previously serving as the head coach of the Cleveland Browns and a long tenure as an assistant with the Minnesota Vikings. And above him now sits a Falcons legend in a front office role, brought back specifically to oversee football decisions at the highest level. Former NFL MVP and Falcons legend Matt Ryan was hired as the president of football. That leadership overhaul is exactly why this quarterback situation carries so much weight. Neither Stefanski nor Ryan drafted Penix. Neither of them signed Tagovailoa's predecessor deals or built the roster around Kirk Cousins 2 years ago. They inherited this quarterback room, injuries and every decision they make about it, including panic moves like releasing a veteran backup on the same morning a starter goes down, will be read as evidence of how this new regime operates under pressure. And the roster around that quarterback room isn't bad. Stefanski inherited a talented group to work with once someone finally wins that job. A dynamic running back, a genuine #1 receiver, and a tight end capable of stretching a defense. Kevin Stefanski inherits Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts, but faces a sketchy quarterback situation with Tua Tagovailoa and Michael Penix Jr. That's the frustrating part for anyone watching this from Atlanta. The pieces are there. The head coach has a track record of getting the most out of a quarterback room. What's missing, at least for now, is a healthy answer at the one position that determines almost everything else. The preseason schedule adds its own pressure to the timeline. Atlanta doesn't play its first exhibition game until the middle of August, which gives both Penix and Tagovailoa a real window to get healthy before anything meaningful is on the line. Atlanta won't play its first preseason game until August 14, but even that date comes with its own uncertainty attached. Nobody in the building, including the head coach, has committed to actually playing Tagovailoa once he's medically cleared, let alone naming a starter based on what happens in exhibition snaps. It remains unclear whether head coach Kevin Stefanski will play Tagovailoa in that opener, even if he is fully healthy. That uncertainty cuts both ways for Penix too. If his 4-week clearance window holds, he'll be walking into that same preseason opener with barely any live team reps under his belt, working against a defense that's had a full training camp to install and rehearse its calls. Given his injury history, nobody in the building is going to fast-track that, just to make a preseason storyline more compelling. If all goes well from here, Penix will be healthy enough to enter the season as the team's backup, and will be able to step in if Tua is injured or falters. As Penix himself noted, his injury history means there's no sense in pushing too hard, too fast to get back and risking the entire season. So where does that leave the competition that was supposed to define this entire summer? Right now, it leaves it delayed, not decided. The emergency signing of Cooper Rush wasn't a verdict on either Penix or Tagovailoa. It was a stopgap, a way to keep practice functional, while the two men actually competing for the job work their way back onto the field. Rush and Strand will soak up reps in the meantime, and whichever of them looks sharper in exhibition action could end up meaning something for a much smaller battle. The number 3 job on the depth chart come final cuts. But the real story is still unfolding in the training room, not on the practice field. Every day that passes without Tagovailoa back in pads is a day of installation time he doesn't get in Stefanski's new system. Every week that Penix stays limited to 7-on-7 and individual drills is a week further from proving he can still be the explosive, gunslinging version of himself that made him a first-round pick in the first place. What's certain is this: the Falcons walked into camp with a plan, and within 24 hours, that plan collapsed into a roster emergency nobody had scripted. They responded by making the kind of move that looked reckless on the surface, cutting a veteran, signing a stranger, trusting a rookie, because the alternative was showing up to practice with no answer at all. Whether that gamble pays off won't be decided this week, or even by the time the preseason opener kicks off in mid-August. It'll be decided over the next several weeks, as two quarterbacks with very different injury clocks race to prove they're the answer to a question this franchise still hasn't been able to solve for 8 long years.